So he was right. He asked me if he could say all those things that are written about me, and I said, no, don't say anything, but you can say that we're trying to spark economic growth. And what I'm hoping to talk to you about for the next few minutes, and I think what you're going to hear a lot this afternoon, is what can we do? So let's stop talking about stuff and start figuring out what we can actually do. And specifically what I want to talk to you about this afternoon is what can we do around supporting women and getting women to help us support economic growth. So very specifically, there are some people that are doing something, and I didn't go to MIT, but I wore this t-shirt for a reason. I wore it for a reason. A, I do spend a lot of time there, but I wore it because 8 years ago, MIT decided to do something. You didn't read about it, you didn't hear about it, there was no campaign, but what they decided to do is try to get 50% of their undergraduates be women. 2 years ago, it happened. Did you hear about it? No, but 50% of the undergrads at MIT are women. So why is that important? Yes, we give thank you, Bill Ollett, Susan Hockfield, and the whole crew there. And I do spend a lot of time there because they have women in energy, they have women in life science, they have Sloan Women in Management. I was there this last year with Marissa Meyer doing a big thing on essentially women and entrepreneurs. And so they have like this all-out focus on this, and they're doing something. But it's not enough. And here's why it's not enough. And it's the awesome news, but also the problem. The reason it's the awesome news is, so unfortunately, as of 2 years ago, over 50% of the individuals in this country receiving undergraduate degrees, bachelor's degrees, and graduate degrees are women. In the life science space, if you even just look at PhDs, the majority, as in 68%, are women. So why is that a problem? Well, it's a problem because we're training them all. We have this huge level of availability that Brad Felds and NC Witt have been working on for a long time. Unfortunately, they're not becoming entrepreneurs. And by the way, I told Brad I was going to say this. So Brad's Startup Revolution, you guys have the book. If you go to the website, it's called Startup Revolution. If you buy this t-shirt that I've been wearing all morning off of the website, proceeds will go to National Women in Technology, which Brad is the chairman of the board. So buy these t-shirts and support women in computer science. So 50% of these are women. So 2 weeks ago, there was an article in Business Week, and the article put together all of the statistics, and as you guys know, who are much better data nerds than I am, you can tell a story with any slice of data. But pretty much all of the data would tell you the same thing. About 28% of the business owners in the United States are women. 28%. That's a really little number when it's the most highly educated part of our population. The other thing that we know, California, Texas, and New York. What is California, Texas, and New York? The place where most of the women entrepreneurs are. Biggest states, a lot of times what we're finding from an entrepreneurship perspective, women move from places like I live in Kansas City, or like you live in Iowa or anywhere up here, and go to California and New York to become entrepreneurs because they don't have, like we heard from Miss Rogue, who was so Miss Fearless this morning and lives in Montreal, don't have a network of people to support them in the communities that they're located. So huge problem for them. So when we look at where do these women work, when they're starting these companies, where are these, or what kind of companies are they starting? And the answer is, it's all over the place. Even though there are a very small number of women in getting computer science degrees, we heard this morning from the guys in Chicago, tons of the women that are doing Girls That Code or Startup League or any of those programs, you don't have to be a computer scientist to do that. So tons of women are going to do this. Aileen Lee at Kleiner Perkins, literally the majority of her portfolio are women entrepreneurs that don't necessarily have computer science degrees, but because of the design skills and the other skills, they've married up with, in a lot of cases, computer science guys to start those companies. So what you can see here is it's all over the place. I mean, they're starting all sorts of different kinds of companies, but there's a teeny number of them. So what else do we know? We know that there's a lot of organizations out there that are attempting to support women entrepreneurs, not necessarily from an education perspective. Education, frankly, is really not the problem here. As I said earlier, highly educated cohort of women. Unfortunately, the problem is the lack of access to mentors, advisors, capital, et cetera. ASTIA is an example of an organization that we fund. I asked them to send me a map of the United States of where all the ASTIA companies are. You have to apply to get into ASTIA, and ASTIA offices are located in New York, San Francisco, and London, simply because, as you can see from the size of the bubble, that's where the majority of the entrepreneurs are. We have one in Kansas City, and that's one that I found and introduced to them. Otherwise, they would have 0. And as you can see, there's very few, and we could probably give that number 6 number all that credit to Brad out in Boulder, Colorado. So you can see we've got kind of this unfortunate big hole in the middle of the United States. The other thing that I did was we are a supporter of Women 2.0. Women 2.0 is a little bit like Silicon Prairie News. It's really a media company and an event company. Started by a first-generation immigrant in the United States from Canada, who is located in San Francisco and has literally, when I met Shahuro, she had been bootstrapping this company for 2 years, trying to do Founder Friday events for women, trying to do pitch events for women, et cetera. She has been unbelievably successful. When I went to San Francisco Women 2.0 event last year, Naval from AngelList was a judge. They've got lots of guys involved, not just women. It was completely sold out, packed audience in a big location in San Francisco. We've got the same thing going during Global Entrepreneurship Week in November. We've got an event in New York. But what do you notice about this list? Correct. So I was just going to be silent until somebody said something. I could do that for a really long time. There's nothing in the Midwest. And what's even more sad about this, and my friends from Tennessee, where are you? Where's my friends from Tennessee? Okay, I met friends from Tennessee who are going to solve this problem this morning. So what's most sad about this is Founder Fridays are led by volunteers. They're led by volunteers from across the country that 3 years ago saw what she was doing in San Francisco and New York and called and said, give me the recipe, tell me what I can do, how do I replicate this thing? And so this has obviously been viral. She had no resources whatsoever in Latin America and in Europe, and it just became viral from those communities. And when I met the folks that are here this morning from Tennessee, and I want to give a shout out to Startup Tennessee, which is just rocking the Startup America Partnership program, they said, oh, well, crap, we'll do it. And so now she's completely on the line to do this. And so the message here is, this isn't hard, guys. Somebody has to step up. And I say guys and girls because, frankly, Bill Allett at MIT, who's the head of the Entrepreneurship Center at MIT, has literally been the biggest supporter of women's entrepreneurship at MIT. He doesn't even have daughters. He just really wants to do it. He thinks that a lot of the women are super smart that are part of his program, and he's been helping to really push this initiative for the last 3 years. So this isn't about girls supporting girls. This is about, as I said in the beginning of this, all of us trying to reach out to 50% of the highly educated population in this country and figuring out how to engage them in entrepreneurship and economic growth, of which means we need new companies. So we need you. So what's the good news? The good news is the data are starting to look pretty darn good. I mean, we still only have 28% of the firms in this country started by by women. But 3 years ago, I got really frustrated by all of the women's organizations that were out there that weren't collaborating. And so we launched something in New York City called the We Own It Summit. And I stood on a stage in New York City with Nick D'Onofrio, who was one of our senior fellows, and I said, we're launching the decade of the women entrepreneur. I had absolutely no data to support that, but people repeat that statement all over the world now. And so we got 8 years to go to reach the point in time where we have actually the decade of the women entrepreneur. Ernst & Young Winning Women launched 3 years ago at the same time. Ernst & Young essentially adopts a cohort of 15 women that are entrepreneurs every year. Those women are seeing year over year 50% growth of their companies. Never have I seen, I mean, Brad, I bet the Techstars can't even say something like that. Never have I seen something like this. And again, in their case, it's not about education. They're highly educated entrepreneurs. They need to be surrounded by people who can figure out how to get them the network of customers, advisors, and mentors that they need. And so it's working, and huge shout out to Ernst & Young for doing it. Astia, we're seeing 25% growth of the companies that are in Astia. It's a way bigger cohort than the others. Springboard, Women in Mobile, Kelly is doing a phenomenal job in New York City. As I said, Shaharose at Women 2.0. And Hallie and the team, Linda Avey at Rock Health in San Francisco, have created something out of the blue that they're calling XX Healthcare. Hopefully all of you have taken science and know what that means. And literally are bringing together the women scientists around the world and trying to introduce them to the idea of entrepreneurship and starting a company. So the point here is we do have some really awesome news on the horizon. But we have really bad news on the horizon, is in the middle of the United States. And I know, because I asked Jeff to tell me 2 days ago, what's the percentage of women that are part of this conference? And the answer was 30%. And that's pretty darn good, I think. How many of you are entrepreneurs? Women. Yeah, women. That's pretty good. It's still a pretty small number. And we need to get to the point where we have a big number. I think we heard from Miss Rogue this morning, and she was so smart about this when she said when you're in Montreal, it's really hard to participate in networking events like this where you're going to meet the entrepreneurs, the advisors, and the mentors that you need. And unfortunately, when there are those huge events, whether it be South by Southwest, whether it be TED, et cetera, 3 years ago, and I'm sorry guys at TED, but 3 years ago, we looked at the TED roster and there were 19 women that were entrepreneurs that were at TED, and that's out of a total of 1,000. And so when we started talking to women and asking them, and 0% were from anywhere except for California and New York. And so when we started to ask women, why do you not participate in these events? What we heard was, A, I don't get invited. Bad answer. And up to all of you to invite them. And B, I can't take time to do something that you call networking. And I think what you heard from her this morning is maybe it would have happened if she would have gotten in there. Maybe it would have happened if she would have met that awesome Brad Feld that you'll hear from next. Or other advisors and mentors that are here. But you guys can make the difference. You're here, you're in the middle of the United States. We need economic growth here, and we need everybody. I'm confident that your universities are graduating lots of awesome men, women that are blue, green, pink, et cetera. And only if we have everybody in the pie are we going to have economic growth and recovery in this country. So I just want to reach out to all of you and say, please find a woman entrepreneur, go out of your way to support them, go out of your way to introduce them to people who can be their customers, their suppliers, their advisors, and in some cases, their funders. And we'll have growth for us all, and we won't have to have this conversation again in 8 years. Thank you.
folks who have questions, you can line up to the microphones right here to the left of the stage and to the right of the stage.
And you can ask questions about women's entrepreneurship, or you can ask questions about Kauffman Foundation. I had lots of people at lunch said, who's the Kauffman Foundation and what do you do?
Hey, Lesa. So your first slide, it's something like women entrepreneurs equals economic growth. And you closed with get everybody in the pie for a bigger pie. So, and the whole talk is about the lack of women entrepreneurs and initiatives to get more women entrepreneurs. But I want you to talk more about women entrepreneurs equals economic growth. Convince me why we need more women entrepreneurs.
Well, and that's why I showed you the availability and why I'm wearing the MIT t-shirt. I mean, unfortunately, you could look at this in a kind of a sad way. When we're spending taxpayer dollars graduating more women and men, and then they're dropping out of the economy in terms of, net new jobs come from companies less than 5 years old. We created that data point. And so unfortunately, if we don't have more of those people that are graduating with degrees in whatever, in computer science, if we don't have more of the creative destruction that's happening in big companies, and those executives then go out and do something else, if they don't create new jobs, we're in trouble.
Thanks.
By the way, real quick, I love that. He's like, yesterday, he's like, convince me why I should wear a sport coat. Convince me why there should be more female entrepreneurs. Give me some, man. I'm not mad at you. I agree 100%.
Absolutely,
I love it.
absolutely, and I appreciate it.
Right here.
Hi, Lesa. You don't need to convince me. I'm a woman entrepreneur. Never thought of myself that way, but I'm launching next week with a web-based nonprofit.
And what's the name?
Got to get better at promotion. It's redbasket.org. And we are based out of Omaha, Nebraska. We're doing a beta test. But enough about me. I've also been recruited to NC WIT in Omaha. What is the secret sauce at MIT? What can we do differently in Omaha, you know?
What is the secret sauce at MIT? Well, frankly, I do think it's interesting that a lot of the, and Bill, you better appreciate me for giving you all this credit. I do think it's interesting that a lot of the leadership at MIT to get more women into entrepreneurial programs is led by men. I think, I'm in my 50s, I admit it, and I never thought that I would do women's things because it was never a problem or an issue for me in my career. And a lot of women my age don't want to take leadership in women's things because they don't see the economic problem, as you don't. No, I'm teasing you. And so I think what's important is that we all have to come to the table. Again, this is about our economy and growing our economy. And at the end of the day, we've talked a lot in the last couple of years. Wendy Gillis, who's our head of communications, has often said, if we could rename ourselves, we would be the foundation of startups versus the foundation of entrepreneurs. Because the fallacy that you're hearing is that there is one person starting a company. And if you've read anything about successful companies, it's almost always 2 or 3. And if I can just have one of those that are women, and we could be harnessing this great minds that we're creating, then we're good to go. But we need the entire communities to support them, not just other women, but we need, and I think that's the secret sauce that MIT has had, is that there's some very, very visible people that have stood up and taken leadership.
Well, thank you for your talk. I am a female entrepreneur in Chicago, so I love the idea of bringing more women leadership together. I also have 11-year-old baby sisters, and I really hope that they will see what I'm doing and maybe move forward in the same way when they grow up. But in the vein of someone yesterday who asked during a talk if they could have some time with you afterwards, I'm deciding to put myself out there and see if you'd consider me as a potential mentee, because I think you have a lot of value that you can
Done.
offer. All right. Fantastic.
Boom.
So I cannot remember the author of this post. I think it was on TechCrunch about balancing family and having children with a career. In even both sexes in the Midwest, there's a younger age of marriage here. I don't know the exact stats than on the coast. Do you think there's any correlation around, Midwest younger thinking about a family in the mid-20s versus on the coast after you're 30? You're okay with that?
Probably, but I have to tell you something. When I first started looking at all the research on this topic, I kept getting involved in that discussion. In terms of why, are they having babies? Are they doing this? Are they doing that? And I kind of decided I just can't go there anymore. I think I can't figure out why anymore. We just have to, Brad and I kind of have this common thing. Can we just do it? Can we just do it? And figure out who they are, where they are, and let's find them. I bet you're right.
Well, I felt like there was no good way to ask that question.
No, and I bet you're right. I bet
it's on my mind.
Yeah. No, and I bet you're right. And I don't know. I mean, obviously, there's nothing to do about all of these sociological issues, and it's fascinating because we're seeing a huge number of women entrepreneurs in the UK. And so they're popping up in kind of strange places, as you saw from the previous slide. Down in Latin America, which one would think there's some of those kinds of things. We're seeing a huge number of women entrepreneurs come out of the woodwork. So I don't know. It could be, but I worry that a significant number of women, very successful women entrepreneurs, that if most of you looked at the bios behind the women that that are successful entrepreneurs, you would find out most of them are from the Midwest. Including Marissa, who's from Michigan. So I worry that we're losing them all, and if you want to keep them, we better figure out a way to embrace them and put a community around them. So I totally think you're probably right.
This may sound weird coming from a guy. The launch...
Be fearless.
I'll try. So the first argument I had for this conference was on Tuesday night at the bar, and somebody challenged me on what are you doing to accelerate women-owned businesses and so on. And my comment was, why are we trying to accelerate something when we should just be merely equally supporting?
Yes.
Globally, and I think the source of data is Jim Clifton's book, Coming Jobs War,
Yeah.
but globally, women own more businesses than in the US. Mm-hmm. I think this country's inability to produce a woman governor in the state, a woman president, is representative of the problem you're talking about.
Yeah.
The fear I have is the more we try to say that we need to push a segment of society farther up, the more there is a chance that people in that segment might say, that battle's going to be too hard to fight. Yeah. I'm just not even going to try.
Yeah.
So if the playing field is equal, and those of us who are in the support positions treat everybody equally, I don't think we need to make a special jump for any segment of society.
Yeah. No, and you're right relative to outside the United States. Unfortunately, that data point is tied to micro enterprises, not high growth companies. Sanjita at Gallup is a friend of mine that does all of this research relative to entrepreneurship around the world. And women, especially in developing countries, carry the lion's share of the load. But it's almost all micro enterprise. In most cases, it's again, you've got not necessarily a highly educated economy where you see most of the women leading the world. I think there was an article in the paper this morning saying in the next 10 years, 1 billion new women will come into the developed economy. And since we know they pay back loans, especially in developing countries, better than men do, which is a fact, we should embrace them. I mean, that was the rationale that we should embrace them. But I am 100% with you. We should be embracing all entrepreneurs. And the reason to push on the women topic is the high level of availability and the worry, if I care about return on investment for taxpayer dollars. And as I said, we have a significant number of women getting PhDs in this country, almost always funded and supported by taxpayer dollars in the United States. Let's make sure that we do something with that by simply opening the door and letting them in.
So here's the question part, and since, well, you're too far away. So the question part is, why is there the assumption that you have to be smart, like with a master's or a PhD, to be an entrepreneur? I'm hearing that assumption, but maybe I'm wrong in hearing that.
No, and you're right, there's not. We know, and as I said, this is why it's important to talk about startups versus individual entrepreneurs. I mean, we know that there's a significant number. Let's look at Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, et cetera. They all went to great schools, but they dropped out of college. We know Mr. Kaufman started his company and never went to college. And he said he's a common guy in the middle of the United States, and he wanted to start a pharmaceutical company, and everybody said he couldn't do it. And he did it and had the first $2 billion drugs in the marketplace. So we know it's all walks of life that become entrepreneurs. It's absolutely all walks of life. But what's sad is when we do have highly educated individuals that don't necessarily, because in many cases they start companies and never make it, they're not surrounded by the right network, it's sad to see that happen. And if we can simply reach out our hands and support everybody, no matter what color they are, or as I said, and no matter what age they are. There was an awesome guy at lunch that I sat with that's wearing a tie, and I think he feels discriminated against. And we hooked him up. Oh, there he is, hi. And we hooked him up, and he's wearing a tie for a really good reason. And we hooked him up with some other people, and I think he's cool that he's here now. But you know, we don't always welcome people. And we don't always, depending upon what community you live in, you're not always, and you're going to hear this from Brad over and over and over again, we aren't always inclusive in bringing everybody into the entrepreneurial community, and we need to be.
Thank you.
I think one more, and then I'm going to be kicked off.
Okay. You might have just answered my question, and I really love Teja's point that we can just equally focus on everyone, but we also know that, you know, where are the women? They're not here. So we're trying to focus equally on them, but they're not here. So, I always get stuck in this conversation of, do they have special needs? Like, are they different? Why are they, and I know you don't want to talk about why, but is there a special need that we need to be considering in order to open up that inclusiveness that you're talking about?
So this is why the power of networks is so important, and I'm sorry, I know I'm over, but this is super, super, super important. So let me give you an example. There was a study done at MIT 6 years ago by Fiona Murray, and she interviewed all MIT faculty in science and engineering and asked them, the question was, to get to the point of networks, what were their networks? And the question was, what boards are you on? Guess what they found? The men, the vast majority of male faculty members sit on startup advisory boards, scientific advisory boards of companies, or for-profit boards. 0% of the women sit on anything other than a not-for-profit. And when you ask the question, so how come? The answer was always, I've never been asked. Alice Gast, who was the VP of research at the time at MIT and had just become one, sorry Alice, I totally don't mean to out you on this, because she's now a university president. She said to me, no one ever asked me to participate in any kind of a for-profit board until I became the VP of research at MIT. She's a friggin' MIT. And never was asked. She said, the moment I became the VP of research, suddenly I had all sorts of asks. You know, part of that could be maybe, again, we don't put ourselves into the right community where we're going to get asked. Part of it is literally, we're not part of the good old boy network. It's still alive and well, and don't get asked. And I think that was proof positive. So thank you guys for giving me the time. Appreciate it.